who is a dear friend of mine and a very, remarkable person on many levels. She's not only a Sanbo Zen teacher, but also a sort of key figure and maybe right-hand person kind of thing to an important Chinese master called Hsin Tao, who's a Dharma master that Maria has known quite a long time. And she is multilingual, I think, at the very least, I think English, Japanese, Chinese, and German. There may be other languages I don't know about, all to a very high level. And she's done a lot of translation actually for Sanbo Zen, and has lived in Japan for quite a long time, and also visited China on many occasions for extended periods. She's a mother of two boys, they're men now, and has been very involved in interfaith dialogue. There's actually an organization. I mean, interfaith is a general thing that goes on, meetings and dialogues between different faith traditions, but there's actually an organization, I think, called Interfaith as well, that Maria has been an important figure in, instigating dialogues between, Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, and so on for many years. So I think I'll just hand it right over. Thank you very, very much indeed, Maria, for agreeing to come, so to speak, to us tonight, to join us anyway. We're very, very lucky to have you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much, Henry, for that gracious introduction. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight to practice together and to listen to my talk. When we met Henry and his family last week in New Mexico, Henry said, Maria, would you like to give a Dharma talk? Why don't you talk perhaps on your master in Taiwan or on a koan? And I thought, oh, I would like to give a talk on my master, which I haven't done that before, on my teacher. So as Henry said, his name is Master Hsin Tao. So this is my teacher from Taiwan. And I first met him almost 40 years ago. And I will tell you about that a little later. So the first thing that came to my mind in the context of this talk is how many great teachers and patriarchs in Buddhism had lost a parent early or were orphans. For example, Buddha Shakyamuni, of course, you know that his mother died during his birth. Or Dogen, Master Dogen, lost his mother at age 7 and entered the monastery early. Or the 6th patriarch lost his father early and had to support his widowed mother. And also the founder of Pure Land Buddhism, who was born a little earlier than Dogen, his name is Shinran. He also lost his parents early and entered the temple at age 9. So my teacher, whom we all simply call Shifu, Master, was born in 1948 of Chinese parents in the northeastern part of what was then Burma. And he was abandoned by his mother at age 4, lost his father a bit later, and then also the aunt who took care of him. So when he was 8 years old, he became a child soldier and was caught up in the conflicts between the Chinese communists and then the Taiwan National Army in Burma in the 1950s. And with all those horrors of the war that he experienced as a child, he grew up earnestly seeking a solution to the suffering and the impermanence he saw all around him, and an answer to that question of life and death. So I wonder, what is it that triggers a spiritual awakening in us? I think the death of one's parents at a young age is a foundational experience of pain, loss, abandonment, fear, impermanence. It's a foundational experience in that sense that there is no foundation. The bottom really falls out from life as you knew it. It feels like there is nothing or nobody there to rely on, least of all life. So what is life? What is death? When Shinran entered the monastery at age 9, he composed this poem. Like the cherry blossom, the heart planning on tomorrow is ephemeral indeed. What sudden storm may not arise in the middle of the night? I think we can relate to this feeling now with the unpredictability of the corona situation. But there are other triggers of spiritual awakening, of course, like the experience of the Buddha when he first left the walls of his palace and encountered the three messengers, as they are called in Buddhism: old age, sickness, and death. And then later, of course, a yogi, a spiritual seeker. And those experiences made him resolve to leave the comfort of the palace behind and find a solution to that question of life and death. And in the case of Huineng, or Enno in Japanese, the famous sixth patriarch, it was hearing a line from the Diamond Sutra, being recited when he delivered wood to a customer when he was 13 years old. And this line is, abiding nowhere, mind comes forth. And this triggered his initial awakening and made him look for a master under whom to become a Buddhist monk. Abiding nowhere, mind comes forth. So what's that mind that abides nowhere? What form does it have? What shape? Where is it? What is it? So in Chinese, the word that we translate as mind or heart is the same character, shin or kokoro in Japanese. Sometimes it's translated as the heart mind. But what it points to is the core of our being, this unbound, limitless reality that abides, that dwells nowhere, without any foundation, without any bottom. That mind of nirvana, which the Buddha transmitted to Kashyapa. So that mind is constantly arising, lifting a flower, laughing, crying, or mountains, rivers, the great white earth, sun, moon, and stars. That's how Dogen put his own realization of this mind. And yet, it's that very mind, that mind of ours, our own mind, that we often feel is not at rest. Just like our second ancestor, Huike or Eka, who came to Bodhidharma crying, please, master, my mind is not at rest, give it some rest. So isn't that why we also come to Zen? So in the case of Shifu, another trigger of awakening for him was hearing the name of Bodhisattva Guanyin, or Kannon, the Bodhisattva of compassion who listens to the cries of the world. He was 15 years old then. And at the time he was still a student in the army, which had transferred him back to Taiwan from Burma at age 13. And just hearing that name of Kannon, of the Bodhisattva of compassion, made him instantly realize that compassion is real. In an interview, Shifu was once asked if he had felt that instant and deep connection to Bodhisattva Guanyin because he had lost his mother so young. And his answer was that, yes, that's very well possible. But so in any case, his resolve to start practicing meditation and becoming a vegetarian, which was difficult in the army and made him the object of many jokes, was taken there and then, when he heard that name of Guanyin, which made him cry. And to strengthen his resolve, he tattooed his arm with the following vow: I will not rest until I reach enlightenment to repay Guanyin's kindness. I will not rest until I reach enlightenment to repay Guanyin's kindness. So the vow, of course, is foundational for the path of the Bodhisattva. It helps to set our intention and it helps us to persist on our path. And chapter 25 of the Lotus Sutra is entitled The Universal Gate. And that chapter is entirely about Bodhisattva Guanyin, who vows to help or to come to the rescue of anyone who wholeheartedly only utters her name once. And she also vows to not enter into nirvana before all struggling and suffering beings have been liberated. But so what does Guanyin, what does this vow to save all beings really have to do with us? I think that our search for our true self, our practice, is already an expression, actually an actualization of our Guanyin nature, which is empty, boundless, luminous as the sky, enlightening, illuminating everything. So Guanyin is that reality of our own awakened self. That's how my teacher also explained it to me. But so how can we return to and really experience that true nature of ours? So in Zen, we speak about 3 basic attitudes that we need to bring to our practice: great trust, great doubt, and great determination. And so great trust. The Buddhist scriptures emphasize that we cannot do anything without the great trust in the reality of the true self, which of course the Buddha discovered in his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. The time he exclaimed, "Today I and all beings and the great wide earth have accomplished the path together." And his teaching in the Lotus Sutra that all beings without any exception have Buddha nature is of course also based on that experience. So when Shifu only heard Guanyin's name, he was instantly filled with that great trust. See, the light is blinding, but what can I do? So let me go on to the great determination. The determination to go on with our spiritual search. That's the determination to go on with our practice in spite of all obstacles. So this vow of Guanyin actually is already active in our deep self, but we need to bring to it our courage, our determination to do our practice. So, and that determination is fueled by that realization that we do not do our practice just for our own sake, but for the sake of others. And then the great doubt, of course, is to serve to keep our practice alive, to never ever assume that we have reached a point where we don't have to practice anymore. So when I first met Shifu in 1980, I was a student of Chinese language and culture at Shifan University in Taipei. At the time, Shifu was a hermit who had been practicing his vow not to rest until he reaches enlightenment by meditating in graveyards for 8 years. This was after he was ordained as a monk at age 25. And I could imagine that perhaps his early experiences with the sights and smells of death during his time as a child soldier drew him back to that place of death, that place where families would bury their loved ones, mourning and weeping. So that place which none of us will eventually escape, that place of great equality. And Shifu speaks about how meditating in graveyards had exposed him to emotions of the most intense kind, in suffering, loneliness, fear, abandonment, longing, craving, temptations, doubt, impatience, and then the strong makyo, or elusive imaginations. So that was sometimes difficult for him to distinguish imagination from reality. And then there were disturbances, noises, the whispers and wailing of ghosts and spirits, howling wind, pounding rain. But then there was also the deep silence of the night. And on cloudless nights, the shining stars, the expanse of the Milky Way on the boundless sky. And so he says that he gradually overcame both his bodily and mental resistance to sitting, and sat 18 hours a day in meditation, most of it at night. And with that, he gradually entered into deeper states of samadhi, which he describes as light, ease, and peace, and complete absence of any ego consciousness. But the important aspect for Shifu in all of this was the practice to deepen his sense of compassion with all beings, including the dead, the ghosts, and also the snakes in that old dilapidated pagoda where he was sitting. So in the evening during session, we always recite the verse, "Life and death are a matter of great importance. Everything passes quickly by like a fleeting arrow. Be mindful at all times. Do not let a moment go by unaware." So for Shifu, that choice of practicing in a graveyard was to face again that reality of death and to have his practice empowered by that reality. And he tells her that sometimes there were corpses that were rotting outside on the ground, eaten up by worms and insects. But for him, that was a strong lesson, not only about the fact of impermanence, but also about the rare and precious chance that we have to have this human body and mind, that we have this life to practice the way of the Bodhisattva and to develop the heart of great compassion, both with the living and with the dead, and to not ever squander that great opportunity. So there is an account in the scripture about the Buddha and his disciples who entered a forest during a trip. And suddenly they saw a terrified bird that was chased by a falcon coming their way. And one of the disciples quickly opened his arms and sheltered that bird under his clothes. But the bird had just escaped from death and it kept trembling all over. So the Buddha took that little bird and held it softly to his bosom. And the little bird completely calmed down and relaxed. So in his comment on the story, Shifu says the disciple, even though that he was an arhat, was not yet completely free of subtle traces of anger and hatred. But he says the Buddha, a fully enlightened being, was completely free from any kind of defilement. And that's the reason why he is a refuge for all beings, including this little bird. So for my teacher, for Shifu, who was practicing in the company of snakes and ghosts, becoming a refuge for all beings was his aspiration. That really kept up his vigilance. And eventually, he says, the ghosts and the snakes got used to his presence there and left him in peace. And I think becoming a refuge for all beings is actually what our Zen practice is all about. And I don't know if you would see that differently. So there is a little booklet entitled The Way of Dutta, or of ascetic practice, which is an interview with Shifu about the time in the graveyard. And at the end, the person wants to know what Shifu had attained through his ascetic practice. And his answer is, my spiritual practice had no attainment as such to talk about. I hope that through the practice of austerity, I have confronted in greater intensity the naked reality of human existence, namely suffering. And that through my practice and effort, I have gained insight into the empty and illusory nature of all. And I hope that I have really realized the true nature of all things, that I have a bright and clear wisdom. But I truly hope that I can follow in the footsteps of the great monks and beings and be able to help people in all walks of life and enlighten all beings. So after 2 years of study in Taiwan, I left in 1981. And I also left Shifu, whom I had visited regularly at the hermitage for almost 2 years. And I did this to continue my studies at Munich University and to write my master's thesis on Chinese Buddhism. This is how I wanted to check out if everything Shifu told me was actually so. But Shifu told me that unless I took up a regular meditation practice, I would have no clue what I was writing about. And really, I took that warning quite seriously, and then was very fortunate to find Father Inomiya Lassalle, a Jesuit priest, who was a disciple of Yamada Kron Roshi as my teacher, and to attend retreats with him at a Franciscan monastery near Munich. So when I saw Father Lassalle for the first time, I told him that I'm Catholic, and I asked him whether Jesus would not mind if I engage in Buddhist meditation practice. And Father LaSalle just looked at me and said, you know what? I would not worry about that. So this I would not worry about that really completely freed my mind and set it at ease so that I could do my session and fully dive into that practice. So when I returned to Taiwan for a conference 2 years later in 1983, Shifu was no longer in a hermitage, but had moved to a mountain cave on the east coast of Taiwan, where he engaged in 2 years of strict meditation and fasting. And he was only taking a pill made of Tibetan medicine to keep up his energy and some drinking water. And he had lost so much weight and radiated such an intense energy that I almost didn't recognize him at first sight. And at that visit, he told me that I would help him to spread the Dharma in the future, which I didn't believe. And he also invited me to take my refuge. So when he saw my hesitation, he said, taking refuge will not bring you into any conflict with God, but it will ensure that you will always keep the connection to the Dharma alive. That seemed a good thing to me. And so then when I did take my refuge the next morning, it was like a new birth. It really felt so full of joy. That's something I'd never expected the night before. So when Shifu finished his strict fast in the cave, people asked him again and said, what was that experience like? What he had discovered? And this is what he said. As I was struggling with all of the physical pain, because his bones were rubbing against the ground during meditation, because all of his muscles had shrunk away from the extreme fasting. So when I felt all this pain, I kept asking myself, is there anything in all of this which is not in pain? It's strange, but that which knew that the body is in pain, that itself seemed to be just fine. So that which knows the pain knows of no pain. And this is how it gradually dawned on me that there's something deep within us which does not suffer, even if we are half dead from pain. And this taught me not to focus my attention on the pain or mind it at all, but to instead pay attention to that inside which knows of no pain and can never be destroyed, no matter what. And so I discovered that which does not undergo the pain of life and death, that which is free from the suffering of samsara. But when students in a retreat in Germany last year asked him what made him decide to stop his fast and come out of the cave, he just said, you know, I really got bored with it. It was time to do something else. So, something else. The initial monastery buildings on the mountaintop near the cave were established 2 years later in 1985. This simply happened because more and more people came to the mountain looking for Shifu and then became his disciples. So he had to put up buildings. And the monastery now houses more than 100 nuns and also monks. Next, there were some educational and charitable foundations established all over Taiwan. And then Shifu announced to his surprised disciples his vision of building a museum of world religions to foster understanding, respect, and love between the religions. And so his vision of that museum is based on the flower garland or the Avatamsaka Sutra, in which our interconnected universe is described with the image of Indra's net. So this is a net that extends over the entire universe. And it has a shining jewel in each of its knobs. So when you look into one of the jewels, you see the entirety of all the other jewels reflected in it. So in other words, every single thing in this universe reflects the entirety of everything else. And nothing or nobody is ever separate. And I think that's one of the messages that Shifu wanted to convey. That museum opened on November 9, 2001. So that was 2 months after 9/11. And all the money for that project, $66 million US, was raised by Shifu and his followers. And I was asked to join that museum project as an advisor in 1998. so 2 years before it opened, and then to help with the interfaith work after it opened. So right after 9/11, we started with a series of now, I think, up to 17 or 18 Buddhist-Muslim dialogue conferences in different countries all over the world, simply to enter into dialogue, friendship, and cooperation with Muslims. And if it hadn't been for Corona, we would have had a Buddhist-Muslim youth dialogue, another one in Taiwan this past July or June. So then not much later, the Myanmar project began, which is a boarding school, an organic farm for orphans, so a boarding school and an organic farm for orphans and poor children, just like Shifu in northern Myanmar, in Lashio, where we now have about 500 children studying from kindergarten through, I think it's now through middle school. And the next major project already underway is the University for Life and Peace in Yangon. That's a university which is based on the museum's vision of love for all life. So in other words, love for the earth. And the task of that university is forming students in becoming leaders, in addressing and solving our ecological crisis. And that's based on an interdisciplinary approach in spiritual ecology. You may ask if, with all of these challenging projects, is there still enough time for Shifu and the nuns to practice meditation? Good question. The monastery holds a 7-week strict retreat every spring, and then also offers shorter retreats throughout the year. And Shifu, in addition to his daily meditation practice, is on personal retreats about 2 or 3 times a year. So when he first came out with that plan to build a museum of religions, the disciples objected and said, "We know nothing about museums. And you know, with such a big project, Master, we will no longer have the time to do our spiritual practice." And he dispelled their opposition by just telling them, you know, from here on, building the museum will be your practice. There is no difference between life and practice. And practice is dedicating yourselves to the well-being of all beings, of others. So I could tell you a lot about the work and the impact of the museum, or about the other projects which I all love. But for the end of this talk, I want to come back to the aspect of meditation and realization. And if you're interested, I can give you websites or send you articles that I have written, but not right here. So by now I have done about, I think, 7 21-day spring retreats at the monastery. Didn't start when my boys were still at home and in school, but after they went to college, I finally started. And I'm helping Shifu as a translator, both during those retreats and then other retreats he holds in Europe. So what is Chan? What is Zen? It's nothing but the heart, the mind, this core of our being. And our spiritual heart is luminous. It's vast and wide, as Bodhidharma said, infinite, without any form or shape. It's completely transparent, empty, and it's unborn and it never dies. But the problem is here that we fill it up with so much stuff. We really bind it down with our notions of the small I, me, mine. And then we constrict it with our constant occupation or obsession with that world of doing, of having, of thinking. And so Shifu says our original clarity, that luminosity of the heart, gets clouded. And that's the reason why we so often feel ill at ease, stressed or heavy, unfocused, worried, unhappy. So our practice is always to return home to that heart, to that place of clarity and luminosity, to emptiness. And emptiness, of course, is not darkness, but light, that light in everything. As Yamada Kounboshi says, and you can read it in his commentary on Shoyu 69, you may perhaps not realize that each of you is shining with a wonderful light. You yourself are that light. It's the light of emptiness. And my initial Kensho experience with Father Lassalle was seeing that light shining in everyone and everything. And at the time, it really made me laugh and cry at the same time. So why are people sitting there so seriously? Don't they know that they are light? And also, why was I so blind for so long? Why didn't I see this earlier? So this came with tears and a deep sense of repentance. So how do we return? By stopping our busy mind, it's called shamatha, and seeing our true nature, vipassana. That nature is empty, luminous. But we all know it's not such an easy thing. And usually it does not happen without that power of concentration, of joriki, that builds up during retreats. This is my experience, especially during the 21-day retreats in our monastery in Taiwan. My, at the beginning, very distracted mind gradually becomes more and more focused and more still, and then more and more subtle, until it really no longer separates inside and outside, subject and object. It's hard to describe in words, as anybody knows, but ultimately it feels like entering the samadhi, or the stillness of the universe. And that completely opens up and widens the space of our awareness. So the method that Shifu teaches us to develop that power of concentration is a guided meditation that helps us to focus our awareness in 4 steps. First, deeply breathing in and out, and then focusing the awareness on the point under the nose, on the mouth, and the heart. And the next step is naturally following the breath, how we always do, and then becoming one with the breath. But the last and most important part of the practice is deeply listening to silence. The silence of the universe. The silence in every sound. The silence in everything that arises. So it's listening to nothing there at all to move. And when you really listen, you don't think. You even stop distinguishing between sound and silence. So we sit 60 or 90 minutes, and that's rather difficult in the beginning. But once you reach a state of samadhi, your body completely relaxes. It loses its rigidity or heaviness, and then it completely softens with a warm energy. That's really the power of concentration of shamatha. And then how about seeing? So let me put it this way. We have heard and we know that our true heart, our true self, is empty and luminous, that it's infinite, that it's one. But this is usually often still on the level of imagination or intellectual knowledge. So becoming one with the breath and then listening to silence is a process that transforms that intuition, or also transforms intellectual knowledge into experience. So let me give you an example from my own experience. It often rains during the spring retreat. And during a really big storm, the ocean roars, and then buckets of rain really pound that roof over our heads. And then the howling winds bend the trees. And then they rattle the windows, really as if trying to get into the Zen hall. That whole universe is in powerful motion. And yet, we continue to sit still for a long time and simply listen to silence, to nothing. And what happens next is really a wave of indescribable happiness and delight. The rain, the ocean, the sky, the wind, the trees, the roof, the windows, the floor, the universe is one single wave or state of energy, of light. And that wave is you. So when that happens, you clearly know that there are no boundaries whatsoever. There's no inside and no outside, no subject or object. You are that energy. Your body is that energy. And the whole universe is that same energy, just one, not two. It's really an indescribable joy. But here comes a warning. When I tell this kind of experience to Shifu, or I write it down in my diary, which during retreats, our diaries are collected for him to read and comment about. His comment is always invariably this: ordinary mind is the way. Like Jack Cornfield says, after the ecstasy, the laundry. So I think if in our practice, we mainly aim at, or we read about, or we comment on, or we dwell on these kind of extraordinary experiences. I mean, extraordinary simply in the sense that they don't happen all the time. I think we miss what Zen practice is all about. It's, as Shifu and all the teachers say, it's losing our small self and then becoming the big self. And when that happens, our Guanyin nature, that energy of wisdom, of boundless love and compassion, is just naturally set free. And with that, we become simple, ordinary, without any attainments to speak about, as Shifu said himself. And then we keep learning every day anew how to really live our Bodhisattva vow and become a refuge for all beings in our very own way. So I only have to say that I'm so deeply grateful to all of my teachers, both in Japan, in Europe, and also to Shifu. But especially to Shifu for giving me such an example all the time, how to harness that power of love to touch and transform the lives of so many in the world. So thank you for listening and to my experience and my sharing. I don't know if we have time for questions or...
Yes, please, Maria. Thank you so very, very much. I think it would be lovely if anybody has any questions for Maria. Peg, could you allow people to unmute, or you could type them in the chat? What a most beautiful talk. Thank you.
Thank you. And I never had the idea.
Wait, has Maria gone mute for everybody or just for me? Peg, can you unmute?
Everyone can unmute themselves right now. I can find Maria.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
And Henry, I wanted to thank you for the inspiration, because I've never, given a Zen talk on my teacher together with my own experiences in this way. So thanks.
It's so beautiful to hear it all, and the way you've talked about Kuan Yin, and it's just beautiful. Thank you so much. But please fire away with questions, anybody. Either in chat or spoken, if you unmute.
And so, Maria, you are still a practicing Catholic as well?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Mm-hmm. Trying to grow in both traditions.
Very good. Thank you.
But I have to say that my experience of practicing with Father Lassalle, with Yamada Kohn, Roshi, and all my experiences that come from Zen very much have fertilized my Catholic or my Christian understanding. And I would say now they are a seamless one. wouldn't know any other way to express that. And I love both traditions, but was raised in Germany, and we, in my childhood, we were taken to many beautiful cathedrals in Europe, and so I think I had this longing or mystical, I don't know, to find God beyond the words. That's how I would put it.
Maria, I so enjoyed hearing your Teisho. I've always wondered about your past, and to hear it in such beautiful detail expressed, it was just really wonderful. So thank you. I kind of went there with you on that journey, and it was very, very expressive, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Leslie. Thanks for being here. So Henry in the beginning mentioned something about the interfaith work. So I do work for my for Shifu and for that organization, but also for the Elijah Interfaith Institute. So if that's something, and then we also had a group of Palestinians and Jewish people who practice together in Israel, and we still do go to Israel and give some retreats there, even though, I mean, this year it's impossible. But yeah.
Maria, you know, a couple of questions have come in the chat.
Yes.
One is, you can look at these yourself, but I'll read them to you.
Oh, in the chat, sorry.
Yeah. Do you see this one? Which Catholic mystic is closest to your heart and resonates with your Zen practice? And then with gratitude for your beautiful talk tonight.
Oh, which Catholic? I would say St. Francis is very close to my heart, but then all shall be well. All manner of things shall be well. Julian of Norwich, Teresa of Avila. Yeah, even Teresa of Lisieux.
Maria, I don't know if you can see this other one. What do you do now? How do you integrate your life with your work and beliefs?
I think I take it day by day. Actually, I was supposed to be in Germany and give the retreats that Shifu usually gives there at meditation centers, because he had an operation this year. And so he said, you take over. So that was very exciting for me. But then Corona came along. And so that's what I'm doing right now. We are at home. Oh no, sorry. Let me see this one. But I'm very involved with this project in Myanmar, and I hope that eventually I'll be able to go back to South Bend and give a retreat to my lovely Sangha there. So yes, and with Israel, I have many friends. Actually, this morning we had a conference with the Elijah Institute on, it's an ongoing series on religious leaders who tell us about the situation of Corona for their religious community. And we had Sally King this morning speaking about Buddhism. We had an imam from Sarajevo speaking about the situation for Muslims, and also a scholar from Holland speaking about Christians. So I'm involved with those things, you know, through the internet, it's all available. But perhaps to be honest, for me, I have the two traditions. So Sanbo Zen is very much based on koan work, and what Shifu does is much what he calls the quiet or silent illumination. And the koan he will always use is, what is your original face before your parents were born? But he doesn't give us a systematic koan study, which I was really fortunate to do in Sanbo Zen. So I'm still trying to find out for myself how to best combine those two approaches. And I just have to say for myself that this guided meditation that we learned in Taiwan, for me personally, is very, very helpful to reach samadhi more easily and to stay in it more easily. And it seems that what many students also feel in Germany, so they ask for that kind of guidance.
Actually, I've been doing that in our retreats here a lot more, offering guided meditations.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in it, as exactly as you say, for getting closer to samadhi and jhana states as well.
It is helpful.
Well, maybe we're coming to the end for the evening. But hold on, sorry, there's something else coming in, Maria. There's a question about, there doesn't seem to be a, I think some people would like to offer dana, and if you were able to provide a link for people to click on to offer dana, wherever you'd like that to happen, I'm sure that would be appreciated.
Oh, and I see one more question. Is that meditation available on YouTube? Not yet. Simply for the reason that Shifu thinks that people, I don't know, he's hesitant. He wants people to have the right foundation, and maybe it will be made available later on, but right now he doesn't like to make it available to people who have not learned it with a teacher first. Oh, somebody put the English website of Lingzhou Mountain, and the museum is just Museum of World Religions, if you have interest in that.
Well, Maria, thank you very much indeed for sharing beautifully. Oh, wait, there's one more last question. Should we take a look? Can you see that?
Oh, I see. I'm new to Zen practice. How do you go about beginning to journal your practice? Thank you. At the monastery, I must say, lots in my journal is seeing the sights. You know, you see the sun shining into a plug of water, and it's so indescribably beautiful when you have this still and quiet mind. So I describe such things, but to be honest, I have two journals in the monastery. So one is for myself, where I record those things that really move me. And then the other one is the one where I write about the practice, difficulties I might have, or questions, or experiences. And I only do that during the 21-day retreat. I don't journal on my Zen experience now. I did it in the beginning when I was a beginner in Kamakura or even in Germany. And I think you write down what comes to your heart. There is no rule about that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, again, for being there, for those who shared their questions, and Henry, again, for giving me this great opportunity. I'm really honored by that. So thank you.
We're very honored by having you come and bless our Sangha with your wisdom and clarity and deep, open heart of Kuan Yin. Thank you.
Thank you.